To Washington, where some big issues led to a big surprise on the Farm Bill today. The House unexpectedly rejected the bill, 195 to 234. Republicans, who have the majority, blame Democrats for not rounding up enough votes to get it passed. Democrats say the bill was simply too draconian to vote for. Draconian because the bill would have cut more than $20 billion from food stamps over the next decade. Democrats thought that was way too much. And the more conservative Republicans argued the cuts weren't big enough. Republicans also added an amendment yesterday allowing states to drug test recipients and allowing them to deny benefits to anyone who failed to test. And I want to start with that. There's obviously a big debate about food stamps overall, but the idea of drug testing recipients and denying privileges or denying the food stamps if you test positive on a drug test. Yes? No?
Why don't we start criminalizing poverty and throwing people in jail?
But couldn't you make the other argument that if you're on government assistance?
Listen, I don't believe anybody that gets a capital gains tax break should have to pee in a bottle. So they're getting a break too.
And the point is that states can already test if you've been convicted of using drugs. So this goes, another, far beyond that. And I agree. You don't criminalize poverty. You don't start testing people for food stamps. Of course they can do it. Should they do it? Absolutely not.
It sort of countermands the whole purpose of food stamps, doesn't it? Because some large portion of the population receiving, or not large, but some not insignificant portion of the population receiving food stamps is impoverished because of the use of drugs. So it's fundamentally circular reasoning, is it not?
It also begs the question, if somebody tests positive, are we going to offer them treatment?
No, apparently they're going to be out on their own.
Well, I mean, I don't know what kind of societal policy, but the one thing I know, no one is buying drugs with food stamps.
Well, let me play the argument there then that, if the government is giving you money, if my tax dollars are going to, support your family, the least you can do is give me an assurance that you're doing everything that you can to not be in that position. That includes not being on drugs.
But it's okay if they drink alcohol?
Apparently so. Alcohol's legal. Drugs are illegal.
So the policy of the U.S. government would then be to embarrass and humiliate people who are trying to provide for their family with basic food and nourishment? It doesn't make much sense.
That's another good point, too. How much of this is about stigmatizing people who are on food stamps?
A lot of it. A lot of it.
I think it's just grandstanding. I mean,
disincentivizes people to collect.
Does anybody really think this is going to be passed in the form they're bandying it about now?
No, it's not.
No,
it's not. But it also gives you an idea of where the House is right now.
Look, you can understand viscerally the reflexive impulse to pass something like this. Does it make a lot of sense when you reflect on it to punish somebody, to take away something that they need because of behavior that may not be volitional? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
And it's hard to understand to the extent that if you look at the data, there's absolutely no correlation. People taking food stamps are not more likely to be drug abusers than people not. So there is actually no real factual basis for this.
Maybe good politics for
conservatives. I feel strongly about drug testing the rich people who get tax breaks, though.
All right, one additional note on the Farm Bill. The House had, before today's vote, decided to delay wide-ranging changes to food safety, among them requiring farm and ranch workers to wash their hands, make sure that irrigation water is clean, and that animals stay out of agricultural fields. Republicans said that the changes cost too much and delayed them until the FDA studies the economic impacts.
This is why people hate Congress. I mean, can you imagine that they're banging their heads about this with all that else is going on in the world today? They're dithering over whether people should be forced to wash their hands. That's just, it's mind-boggling.
Washing hands is one part of it, but there may be some. This is the kind of thing that people won't see a problem with until they see a spike in the price that they pay at the grocery store.
But you know what is fascinating to me about this historically is farm bills historically got passed with very little discussion, very little, disagreement. They were passed, and all of a sudden in the last few years, it really speaks to how far the parties have gone and how much they have changed.
Into the Farm Bill,
but they didn't used to do that, though, and that's the point. These were passed automatically, and it really speaks to how much the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, but mostly the Republican Party, have really changed. And this is the result. They have now bills that used to pass automatically because you wanted to support the farmers and you wanted to help people get food stamps, all of a sudden have become months and months and months of debate.
And we're not even getting into the billions of dollars in farm subsidies that are included in this bill And that was one of the things Democrats tried to go after, and Republicans said absolutely not. All right, one last thing out of Washington. The Senate debate continues on immigration reform, and there's word of a key compromise on border security, something that Republicans are insisting be a part of any immigration deal. The deal would just about double the number of border agents to 40,000 and add 700 miles of fencing, cost $30 billion. This will actually replace another border provision that would have blocked the citizenship process for all undocumented immigrants until 90% of all border crossings had been stopped, which begs the question, how are you going to prove something that didn't happen? But border security, are we comfortable with the trade-off of enhanced border security in exchange, essentially, for a path to citizenship for the 11 million
I don't necessarily, the way you describe it, see anything wrong with that. But the problem is, even if the Democrats went along with that, once this reaches the House, I just don't see it passing. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, they can't agree on washing hands. And you really think we're going to get a deal on immigration?
Well, this is the kind of thing that they're trying to give to incentivize Republicans in the Senate to vote for it, in the hopes that if we get a big enough vote total,
the Senate,
if we get a big enough vote total,
Senate,
the House will go along with it too.
And securing borders was always going to be part of the immigration bill. This one actually makes it a jobs bill as well, which is great. I hope they have some borders to enforce in upstate New York. But the fact is there are still some problems with the immigration bill. The fact that it's still backdated for 2 years and criminalizes all those folks that have immigrated in the last 2 is a sticking point.
You know, as I was getting into this today, because one of the big arguments for border security is terrorism. We got to stop the threat of a terrorist could just walk across the Rio Grande, except they don't do that.
No, I mean, this doesn't address the root of the problem at all. It's exactly what I was thinking when we were talking about this. Where's the evidence that Islamic terrorists are emigrating en masse over the Mexican border? It's not there.
There's none. There's no evidence.
So why don't they attack the root of the problem, which is going on, raging conflict all around the world? We can't figure out what to do about Syria, where the stuff is breeding, and they're wringing their hands over this. It's really hard to
Does
believe.
anybody know how terrorists get into this country, the ones who have? They use a passport and a visa. They come through the front door, and we open the doors for them. And I haven't seen anything in this that's focusing on
those that aren't born here.
Right, right. Well, those are the ones who are coming to this country to do us harm.
But we should say that politically, this sets back the immigration 10 years. And some Republicans are not happy because, as much as Marco Rubio said the goal is not for the GOP to attract Hispanic and Latino voters, when you set it back 10 years, people like Jeb Bush have cried foul and said, hey, listen, you can't do this because this isn't going to help us in 2016. So it raises some really interesting problems for the GOP.
There are a whole bunch of people that are left out. These kids who came when they were 16 are still not taken care of.
I have no time, but I just want to hear yes or no if you think an immigration deal is going to happen. Jeannie?
No, not before next year.
Dominic?
Absolutely not.
Scott?
Nope.
Mark?
I don't think so either.
Such optimists here on the panel with me. All right, up next, the Supreme Court handed down some fascinating rulings today, like one that would make it harder to punish repeat offenders. That's next. Stay with us.